Hey guys, welcome back to the next topic in your chapter, and that is human eye. So in the previous class, we looked at what is the least distance of distinct vision, and also at what is the angle at which you'll be able to see certain objects of a certain size. Today, we'll look at the different parts of an human eye. Now, this is something that you will have learned in biology, so it will be more like a refresher for you if you already have a memory of what you had studied. Even if not, it's going to be something that you will be able to understand. It's quite an easy thing. It's just understanding how the human eye is built and what each part of the eye will do. Okay, so let's start us off with the first and the foremost. Now, we have two human eyes. Each one is basically connected to the other. They work together to give us vision. We'll talk about like any one. Both of them basically built the same. We'll talk about each eye. Now, the first and foremost layer of an eye will be the outermost part of it. Okay, so the outermost part of an eye is called as the cornea. Okay, so this cornea is nothing but it's like a transparent layer that covers the basically the front part of the eye. Now what we have done here is we are taking you through a 3D model of the human eye to give you an idea about how it looks. So if you can look at the screen, here is the cross section of a human eye. Okay, so this is your eyeball, right? It what it would look like if you had plugged it out. These are the muscles that connect it to the behind the eye, and they just go all the way, connect to the brain and do whatever. That part is not necessary. We are going to look at more about how it's built on the inside. All right, so if this is how it looks like from the front, like we said, the cornea is the frontmost transparent layer. So if I had to show you, I'd say this outermost layer, that would be your cornea. Okay, it basically protects the eye from any mild damage that might occur from the outside. Okay, even when we talk about donating eyes, we actually donate the cornea of our eyes. Now, right behind the cornea is a space. Okay, it's an empty space, but that space is not exactly empty. It's filled by a liquid. Okay, that liquid is called as aqueous humor. That also pretty much does the same thing. It's a liquid, so it kind of lubricates and protects the eyes from any form of damage. Right, so the cornea and the space behind it filled with a liquid called aqueous humor. All right. Now, apart from this, right behind the eye, you will see this part, right? It's what is the colored part of our eye. Now, what these parts are is below the cornea. We'll just write aqueous humor behind it. AQUEOUS, okay, aqueous humor. Now, behind it, we've got the iris, the colored part of our eye. Now, what this iris is basically, it's similar to a muscle, right? It is round in shape. What it does is, it will change its size to accommodate something called as the pupil. Okay, so the iris and pupil are together over here. Now, if this is the iris, the space in front of it, the empty gap, is the pupil. It's what we see as the black colored part of our eye. So if the iris is larger, the pupil's size is smaller. And if the iris becomes smaller, the pupil becomes larger. So the pupil is not necessarily an organ or like a part, but it's basically like a hole that is at the center of the iris. That hole will be controlled by the iris depending on how the eye needs to work. We'll come more into that a while later. Now, Right behind the iris and the pupil, you'll find this lens. Okay, just like the lenses we have seen in activities, a lens is a human eye has a lens. It is transparent. It's a bit uh, soft. This lens is what refracts light and it allows us to see. Okay, so behind the iris and the pupil, we have the lens of our eye. If you see, this lens is attached to certain fibers here and a muscle that goes all the way around it, right? This pink part. Now these are called as ciliary muscles. Okay, what ciliary muscles do? They'll help the lens to work. Okay, a little bit more about that shortly. Let's list them now. So behind the iris and the pupil, we have our lens, we have our ciliary, CILIARY, ciliary muscles. Right now, beyond that, beyond the lens, this whole space is basically like a liquid. It's called as vitreous humor. Okay, this whole eyeball is filled with a liquid called vitreous humor. It's like another medium. Okay, now this eyeball is filled with that liquid. At the extreme back, the extreme other end of our eye over here is the center for our vision. Okay, so basically when the light falls exactly on this, the images are formed by the light that falls here, and those images are transmitted by the nerves all the way back into the eye. These are blood vessels that carry blood to the eye. Not really important according to what we are studying, but basically nerve endings at the back part of it, they will send the images to the brain. Now that part is called as the retina of your eye. Okay, it's called as the retina. As long as the retina is able to transmit an image, you'll be able to see, your brain is going to be able to interpret it. Okay, it's called as retina. Now the working is a little bit more complex than what we were going to study, but the basic functioning is the same, right? So to understand the basic functioning, we know the cornea is here, right? So what light will do is it's going to fall directly through the pupil onto the lens. Okay, light falls through the pupil onto the lens. Now, how much light falls will be dependent on the size of the iris. Okay, say that you are in a room with enough light, sufficient lighting, then the iris will be a certain size. If you go into the dark, what will happen is this iris is going to become much smaller. That means the pupil, the hole is going to become wider. Why that is so that because there is less light, the iris will become smaller. The pupil being larger is going to be able to take in more light than what it normally does. Because of that, in the dark, when you go suddenly, it takes a little time for your vision to come back. You'll be able to vaguely see what is there, right? That is only because of this iris and pupil combination. Same way, if you go to a sudden bright room at once, you won't be able to see clearly because the pupil is taking too much light in. So at that time, the eye is going to become bigger. Basically, it's going to make the pupil's hole much smaller so that less light enters. Only then you'll be able to see clearly. Okay. So pupil size based on the amount of light and controlled by the iris. Okay, that is the function of iris and pupil. Now, once the light falls on the lens refracts the light and bends it inward. Okay, basically, if you look at the shape, what shape would that be? It's a convex lens. Okay, like how we have convex is a convergent lens, right? So it's going to converge the light all the way back into onto this spot. Okay, we also call it fovea centralis. It's the spot of vision. Basically, if your light is able to focus exactly on this point, you'll have the best vision. All right. Now, sometimes you're going to look at objects that are close. Sometimes you look at objects that are far. Okay. When you look at objects that are close, you're able to focus. That's because the ciliary muscles will adjust the size of your lens. Now, if they are close, the muscles are a bit relaxed, wherein you don't need to change the size of your lens. Okay. But once you look at an object that's a bit far, your eyes are going to adjust a bit. The ciliary muscles are going to stretch your lens, make it a little thinner. When the lens becomes thin, is going to allow the light to focus exactly at that spot even when the object is far away. Okay, so that is why the ciliary muscles are there. They'll help you adjust your vision, and it happens really fast also, right? Looking at something close, looking at something far. Both are clear only due to the lens. Now, why the adjustment has to happen is because the size of your eyeball is constant, right? Roughly, it is about 2.5 centimeters. Now, that light, whatever is falling on your eye, should move 2.5 centimeters and meet exactly at this spot. For that meeting to happen, the lens is going to adjust its on its own. All right. We'll learn a little bit more about that going forward in the next topic. For now, just know that the lens adjusts its size to help you focus. And finally, the retina. It will have something called rods and cones. Those are something you learn in biology. They'll help you see clearly and also see in color. Okay, so these are the major few parts of the eye. What you if you want to look at it like a diagram, basically there's one in the textbook. I'd suggest you to make a note of that. That's good enough. And basically it would be something like this. Say there's an object here, or just light coming from certain direction, right? And say this is your eyeball. The light that falls on this ultimately has to refract and meet at the retina, right? At that spot, when they meet exactly at the retina, that's when you're going to be able to see, or else you will not be able to see. Okay, this is the basic principle of how the eyes work. For now, this will be sufficient. What I want you to do, once your class is done, make a note of the diagram that's there in your readers. It's basic enough. And just remember what are the names of each of these parts and what they do. Only when they all work together can you be able to see. All right. So each part and its importance, what it does, and basically which part of it. A labeled diagram. Okay. Remember that. I'm going to write it here. Labeled diagram. Okay. So I hope you're able to follow. Do make a note of all of this and make sure your diagram is ready with you in your books. It's a common question in the exam also to draw labeled diagram of the human eye, and what is the function of each part. They might ask you what's the function of the ciliary muscles, or what's the function of the retina, or what's the function of the iris or the pupil. So just remember what is the function of each of these parts of the human eye. Okay, if that is done, that would be all for this topic. I'm going to end now. If you have any questions, doubts, you can leave them down in the comments below. And I'm going to see you in the next class. Thank you and bye-bye.